Hey, coming up next on Ham Nation, we have got a special guest, Frank Howell, from up in Georgia's neck of the woods, up around Jackson. They're neighbors, actually. And he's going to talk about a new initiative he's got honoring Homebrew Heroes. We're going to tell you where Bob Heil is this weekend and a whole lot of other stuff. And it's all coming up next, right here on Ham Nation.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This episode of Ham Nation is brought to you by ICOM. For more information, visit icomamerica.com/hamnation. And by DX Engineering. DX Engineering offers practically everything you need to outfit your shack, plus the fastest shipping in the industry. Most in-stock items ship the same day, Monday through Friday until 10 p.m. Eastern. For more information, visit dxengineering.com/hamnation.
This is Ham Nation, episode number 411 for July 17th, 2019, honoring Homebrew Heroes. Hey, it's Wednesday at 8 p.m. Central. That means that you're tuned into Ham Nation here on most of this Twit network. Bob is out tonight. He is traveling actually down to my neck of the woods. We'll give you more information on that. But we have the usual cast of unindicted co-conspirators with us tonight. Gordon West is out on the West Coast. We've got George up in the central Mississippi. We've got Frank Howell also from Mississippi. We'll talk to him in a little bit. But I want to tell you about a few things before we go around and see what's going on with the rest of the guys. I'm talking about WTWW, the big shortwave, 5085. They're huge supporters of what we do here on Ham Nation. In fact, if you're listening to 5085 right now, you're hearing the audio from Ham Nation. They do it every Wednesday night, and they have got requests now, very nearly instant request. There is a request button at the top of WTWW.us. You go and you click that thing, you fill out the form, and in literally mere minutes, you'll hear your song. In fact, if you time it right, it might even be the next song you hear. I mean, it's amazing how it works, and they're really the only shortwave radio station doing that. And you'll hear some of the greatest voices from Top 40 Radio on WTWW2. World famous Steve Taylor, Thursday nights, 8 to 11. Grant Hudson, Friday nights, 8 to 11. Jeff Lawrence, Saturday night, 8 to 11. Big Jim Edwards, Sunday night, 8 to 11. Big Jim Edwards is a former Newsline staffer. Did you know that? He sure is. And they're all hams. That's the cool thing. And, of course, Ted Randall, his actual self on Monday nights from 8 until 11. And if you'd like to email the boys, you can do that at email@WTWW.us. Want to get a big plug-in for those guys because we sure appreciate everything that they do for us here at Ham Nation. Let's see what's going on with Gordon. Gordon, how are things over on the left coast tonight?
All is well, and we've got a special for those that go hiking and get lost, those that go sailing and run into rocks or other things that don't move, those that go flying. We're going to talk all about emergency rescue beacons tonight, Don.
Oh, always good. Let's head up to Jackson now and see how's the water moccasin doing in the transmitter, George? Is he still there?
You know, that water moccasin owns that transmitter now, so I stay out of that building. It's an abandoned building, so I don't go in there unless I absolutely have to. Well, of course, you know how wet and hot it's been here, Don. But I am looking forward to heading a little further south this weekend. I know you're going to tell us more about that, but we'll be seeing Bob tomorrow down there at the Amateur Radio Symposium in Slidell. And hope we'll see some more folks down there.
Yeah, we got more information on that coming up. Bob is going to be in Slidell, Louisiana at the Ham Fest, and also at a thing going on before that. I'll be at the Slidell Ham Fest. George will be at the Slidell Ham Fest. So if you ever wanted the chance to meet some Ham Nation hosts in a setting that is has a little bit less of a social crush than something like the Dayton Hamvention, if you're going to be in South Louisiana, it's a good time to come see us. Frank Howell is a special guest tonight. We'll get to him in a second. But first, Gordon, tell us all about the short shots tonight, my friend.
Right into short shots. So, Victor, go ahead and roll it. Well, we're going to talk about not only maritime emergency beacons for calling out for help, but also those used on land, as well as those that are used in the air. And we remember the early emergency beacons that many ham sets could tune in on VHF 121.5. And Victor, if you want to come back to me for just a second, I'm going to show off what an activated beacon would sound like on a demonstration channel. Take a listen. Here it goes. That was the sound of an activated 121.5, and you can go back, Victor, to that original shot, 121.5 beacon, and it used to be one that the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary that we would track down and find out is it an accidental activation or what, but we've come a long way from the old days of 121.5 signaling, but every one of the beacons I'm going to be talking about, except for one, still continues to transmit on 121.5. In fact, when I do our U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary comms demonstrations, a lot of even Coast Guard personnel didn't realize that when they're tracking down emergency activated beacons, which are called EPIRBs, Emergency Position Indicating Radio Beacons, the EPIRBs now work on 406 megahertz, and they didn't realize that there's still a 121.5 tone. Now, for those that are not out on the high seas in the middle of nowhere with an $800 EPIRB, the next one down on the same frequency is called a personal locator beacon. And Victor, one more time, if you'll come back to me for just a moment. This is the PLB. This is worn on your belt. We'll go back to that shot, Victor. And the PLB is one that can signal on 406 megahertz on the inland as well as out on the water. So personal locator beacons send up a data stream on 406 megahertz. That is received by both polar orbiting satellites as well as 4 of the emergency satellites that tune into that frequency. And the information is sent down to the military, to the Air Force. They then analyze where the position is of the personal locator beacon. Then it goes to the proper rescue agency, and help will ultimately be on the way. But the PLB, like the emergency position indicating radio beacon, sending a digital call on 406 megahertz, still has that 121.5 little micro signal for DFing in. So it's good that those that go out on the water can either carry a full $800 emergency position indicating radio beacon that signals for over 48 hours, or top left on the green whatever that is it's on, that is the personal locator beacon. And all of those radios behind are similar to ham radios, but they're marine VHF radios. And did you know that marine radios may now be used on shore to communicate with nearby vessels, but not unit to unit on shore, unit to a boat swimming in the water. Relatively new are the localized alert devices. They don't transmit to the satellites, but rather they are local alert beacons. They originally were called MOB, Man Overboard Beacons, but the FCC, RTCM, and other officials said we need to differentiate all these different beacons so we know what to listen for. Well, the alert device on 418 transmits a very local signal, only a couple hundred milliwatts, so it's used only in docks and marinas and areas like that, as well as on land for making sure no one has an emergency. Next week, we're going to talk about the inexpensive beacons from ComSpec. These little devices transmit on the ham radio bands, 222.250 all the way up to 222.830. They broadcast such a flea power, they're never going to interfere with a repeater or activate a repeater, but they can be picked up for almost a half a mile. And with the right type of equipment, which we'll describe next week, this is perfect if you're going to be leading scouts on a scouting expedition, everybody with a different channel, and you're able to tell who's where if they should get lost. Well, let's go back to the boating scene. Again, for those cruising to the wide open waters where there's no one around you, the emergency position indicating radio beacon, an $800 plus device, is what is used to signal to satellites. Your VHF handheld on channel 16 doesn't talk to satellites, but contacts the Coast Guard. And if you're up to 20 or 30 miles from shore, your VHF marine radio is going to get the Coast Guard on a direct basis to their Rescue 21 center. So if you're out here cruising close to shore, no more than 20 miles away, the Coast Guard is going to hear your call. And take a look. For those of you on the Gulf Coast, there's Don. I see you, Don, all the way up to Nova Scotia, and those on the West Coast, as well as Hawaii and Alaska. We are totally covered with ocean coverage to the Coast Guard out to about 100 miles, 20 as a minimum, 100 usually. The Coast Guard has all sorts of direction-finding capabilities aboard their aircraft units, and they're able to track down an activated EPIRB or an activated PLB because they're getting a report on alternate channels as to the exact location, because those little portable beacons can send their position all the way through the satellites. But, you know, no one around you knows you've got a problem or a life-threatening emergency that maybe they're only 5 miles away or 2 miles away. Well, in the marine electronics industry, the latest is called Automatic Identification System, AIS. A little bit like a PRS, but AIS now allows transponders, man-overboard devices, to send out an emergency signal to boaters all around you, not to a satellite, but for local help because the water is cold. There's the VHF radio on 156 megahertz to the left. It's tied into a chart plotter, and with AIS receive, you see everybody around you that has an AIS transponder. But most important, for that boat that ran onto the rocks, you can barely see it in the middle of your screen. They've activated their man overboard device, and they got instant help much faster than if they were to do the personal locator beacon or the EPIRB. And of course, channel 16 is what we use to get help from local Coast Guard units. Well, here's the very latest. It is from ACR, and it's called AIS Link, and it transmits on VHF channel 88 A and B. It also transmits a data distress signal on channel 70. So everybody that has any kind of 2000 and newer marine VHF with a built-in DSC is going to hear this guy go off and even see the bearing to them. So this is for local help, and what they'll see on the screen is a distress signal, a blinking, and they'll be able to navigate to that almost off of their port by about, looks like almost 90 degrees. So AIS requires you have a Maritime Mobile Service Identity Number called an MMSI, and you can get that through Boat US. Go to boatus.com and look for their safety page, and you too can get one, and you would indicate it's for a portable device. So take a look at the ACR website if you do local around the harbor cruising and you want an instant way of signaling to folks that you've gone into the drink and you need help. And you'll be able to get help because everybody around you is going to hear your call. If you were to signal with a EPIRB, it would take probably 15 to 20 minutes before they finally get to the correct rescue agency that's then going to do a local call to everybody saying, come on over and pick you up. And that's 15 minutes lost. We gave some tests of that new man overboard beacon, MOB, and we did it on a test frequency, and it works great. So your leading manufacturer of both land as well as lake, as well as oceans, as well as you name it, is ACR. And they've been nice enough for the United States Coast Guard Auxiliary to allow us to use as a demo some of their ACR products. And these products, the most important one now is the man overboard device, the MOB, and that's a distinction because it transmits on marine VHF channels locally with no contact to the satellites. And in a busy, populated cruising area, that's what you want. Next week, we'll talk all about leading the scouts on a long-haul scout and losing one and being able to find them with a relatively inexpensive beacon designed by a ham radio operator that runs ComSpec here in Orange in California. So, George, what have you got going on? And you've got a special guest, George.
Well, Gordo, that was very interesting stuff there. I did not know about the new updates, and that's great to see that technology is marching right along, and people are kind of coordinating, letting these other these beacons and such repeat through their rigs and their boats. That's a very good idea. I think that'll speed up things quite a bit. Well, tonight I have a guest here with me. This guy is one of my neighbors. Now, don't hold that against him, but it's Frank Howell, K4FMH. It was another ham here in the Jackson Ridgeland area. And Frank, it is good to see you tonight. How's it been going?
Going fine, George. And two comments. I think if I open my door, I might be able to hear you directly, kind of like the old tin can and string. Just live a few miles from you. Gordo, I think George and I may need some of that man overboard. We live near a large reservoir that's populated, probably a few moccasins there, but certainly some long and feisty alligators. So one of us gets lost in the Pelahatchie Bay, we might need one of those man overboard beacons. George, what do you think?
I think that would be a very handy thing to have. I don't go swimming in that reservoir. I try to stay out of the water myself, but it could happen. You could fall in. Well, Frank, what brings you here with us tonight? You've got a new project to announce there, or actually it's an award, huh?
It is, and Bob Howell got some of the preliminary PR, I think, and perhaps Gordo. As you know, I'm on a podcast called the ICQ Podcast that's international but based out of the United Kingdom, and we kind of attended HamVention this year, and as we were sitting in the hot sun eating lunch, we just sort of was collectively amazed by all of the homebrew technology that we had seen at HamVention. And of course, George, you got an award from DARA a few years ago for educating the public through smoke and solder about building things and test bench items and this, that, and the other. And quite a number of others have done. Bill Merrill with Solder Smoke, long-standing podcast about having the knack, as he would say, for building things. And so Martin Butler and his son Colin Butler and I, over lunch at Xenia this year, just said, there's no award to acknowledge excellence in amateur radio for purveyors of the homebrew art. Now, you got a special award by DARA in a broader sense. And there might be some others, but we just aren't aware of any. So since Hamvention, we got together and we have put together the Homebrew Heroes Award. And that's a picture of the website, which I manage and built. And Martin Butler and Colin Butler, the Brits from across the pond, we're the steering committee. And if you saw the ARL webpage today, they announced a press release on it. And if you visited QRZ.com, you know, Zed says they get about 1 million hits a day. So they were kind enough to have a little feature story on the Homebrew Heroes Award. We will have an annual award. We have an anonymous selection committee that will have the unenviable task of determining, you know, who might be a recipient here for the first year and in succeeding years. We have at least one vendor, National Instruments. It's a well-known testing software company. They own a subsidiary that called Digilant. And Digilant has a number of products that are homebrew oriented. One of them is the Analog Discovery 2, which is a Swiss Army knife, if you will, of test gear. And they're going to donate one of those to our recipient. We've got some other well-known vendors of test gear who's thinking about it. And I suspect they may come along and give prizes directly to our recipient. The real goal is to promote excellence in the homebrew, art and craft, and amateur radio, and acknowledge those who've made a real impact. And it's our way of giving something back to the hobby. So Martin Butler and Colin Butler and I are the steering committee right now, and we hope this goes places, because we certainly want to give our applause and plaudits and recognition to those heroes out there who push the envelope in amateur radio. And, you know, that guy that hangs around with you sometime, you know, that Bob Heil, he even builds things out of pine boards, I understand.
He does. And just to be certain here that nobody makes a mistake, you're not talking about some concoction you make in your bathtub, right? You're talking about an electronics type of project, not some kind of beverage.
Well, and, you know, George, here's how we look at it. That type of home brewing is not at all incompatible with the type of home brewing that we're talking about. In fact, I understand some people do a lot of proofing of printed circuit boards after they finish soldering them with that kind of homebrew activity. I don't know. I just heard that.
Yeah. Gordo, what do you think? Does this sound like a neat idea to you?
Yeah, I like the circuit board sniffing for home brewing, but yes, absolutely. There, to my knowledge, in 60 years of ham radio, I don't remember special awards for home brewing, and that would really, I think, kick us off in a big way to start a whole new thing to follow up on Bob's Pine Board. Let's home brew other things and then show them here on Ham Nation. George?
Okay, Gordo. Well, Frank, you know, we've known each other for a few years now, and like I asked the audience here, don't hold that against you, but you know, you're a newcomer, right? You haven't been in ham radio since back in the 50s, like a lot of folks have. You're relatively new.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
I was licensed in 2010. I was 58 years old, but I go back to about 8 years old and building things. And I actually built 2 commercial radio stations when I was 20 years old. And so I held a commercial broadcast license, an FM at the college I went to, and then a commercial AM station, and was news director, and really thought I'd try to be another Dan Rather or something before I went off to graduate school and became a college professor. So I've been around electronics since I was about 8 years old, although I just never got licensed as a ham. I was always listening. So sometimes when I hear people get on their rocking horse and say, listen, fella, you need to listen to the band before you transmit, sometimes I'll come back with, I listened for 50 years. Is that long enough?
Yeah, we all can't be Don Wilbanks, so I'm glad you had a good, solid fallback plan there. Probably you took the better route there, but there's a lot of us that have been interested in this kind of stuff since way back when we were real young, and didn't get involved until later years. And there's people like that coming along all the time. You got any encouraging words for them?
Oh, absolutely. Some of the work I've done as assistant director for the Delta Division for ARRL, some of the surveys we've done with Dave Norris, the Delta Division director, have identified what we'd call the late in life hams, those who are 45 years or older perhaps and have not been licensed very long. Those are the fastest growing segment in amateur radio. And it makes a lot of sense because those of us who got exposed early, but for whatever reason, in my case, I grew up poor. I didn't have an Elmer and just no really environment for me to even get licensed in that kind of encouragement. So I wound up listening. I did get into the CB radio craze and may have talked to someone in Columbia at noon with an amplifier that, I shouldn't have had, but hey, I think the statute of limitations may have run out on that. So, you may not have gotten into it back 50 years ago, but guess what happens when you turn 50 or so? You're in your peak income years. You tend to have an empty nest, and you've got time. And those are three characteristics that lend themselves to getting very active in amateur radio. And that kind of explains, kind of my history. I've been around it. I just wasn't licensed.
Yeah. Gordo?
Oh, that is great, Frank. Now, Frank, a couple of questions that I just was asked locally. On home brewing, do we do everything from the chassis up, or can someone win a nice spot in the prize selection or the homebrew who's number one, number two, if they use a few commercial parts like a printed circuit board? Or are we talking about home brewing, which we do our own individual wiring, or we do our own board? So how much can we do on our own and let a little bit of prefab work into our home brew project for consideration?
Gordo, that's a great question. And, and I've been involved in other awards, particularly in my profession. And when you put them together, one of the temptations is to define them so narrowly that it becomes more about the process than what it is you want to recognize. So we took the opposite approach. We kind of opened the barn door because let's face it, there's not an exact metric that any group could put on all the homebrew activity out there and add up numbers and get that. It's going to be subjective. And what our goal is simply to identify each year someone through homebrew activity. And it could be a group, and it could be as much educational as literally melting solder. But we want to identify those who are making an impact and who are exemplary, which tends to encourage others to practice what, say, Bill Miro would call the knack. Getting in there, putting things together. And, as I teased my friend Dan Romanchek, the CW geek, because, he really promotes CW. And he'll say, Frank, you really need to get into CW. You're not a real ham if you're not in CW. And I go, Dan, real CW geeks build their own keys. So, there's not a specific rule, Gordo. So and it's really not for just a one-off project necessarily, although some one-off projects could be, quite dramatic. I'll name one name, and I probably should, but just take Asher Farhan with the BitX project. There's more than one project to his line now. But when he started the BitX, look at what that caused and look at what that did. And I'm not saying he'd be our winner or he'd even be seriously considered, although he's done a great job. I'm just pointing out it doesn't have to be one project, but we want to look at, and our selection committee will be doing the choosing, but the steering committee wants to try to highlight those who have made an impact that encourages others, even Don Wilbanks, to burn his fingers on a soldering iron and to make something.
Wow. And here you go, Frank. This from Dave, K4TWJ, silent key. But, yeah, he did build his own CW key. Back to you, Frank.
Bet. You bet. You bet. Well, that's a great question. And again, we simply want to get an award out there which will recognize those who exemplify the art and craft and science of the homebrew knack and who urge and push others on into that craft. And who knows, there could be some other awards that come on the heels of the one we're setting out now. And that would be a great thing.
And give us that website address one more time, Frank, just to make sure everyone goes to the right place. Better give us a spelling.
You bet. It's HomebreWHeroes.org. HomebrewHeroes.org.
Okay. Well, thanks for being with us tonight, Frank, and thanks to you and Martin and Colin for putting this together. We'll be interested in watching it and see who's the first year's winner here.
It'll be a few months, but we will certainly have that announcement, and we're just excited about getting this started and out there in the marketplace of ideas. So thanks for having me on tonight.
All right, Frank. We'll see you soon. 7-3.
Take care. 7-3.
Okay, and we'll be back in just a moment, but first let's get a message from ICOM.
Heard it, worked it, logged it. It's time to get the transceiver that's best suited for your lifestyle. ICOM offers a variety of high-performance and innovative products. Make the most out of contest season with one of these ICOMs today. IC7610, the SDR every ham wants. This high-performance SDR has the ability to pick out the faintest of signals, even in the presence of stronger adjacent signals. The ICOM IC7610 is a direct sampling, software-defined radio that will change the world's definition of a SDR transceiver. RF direct sampling, 110 RMDR, independent dual receivers, and dual digicell. Or get the IC7300. Changing the way entry-level HF is designed, this high-performance, innovative HF transceiver with a compact design will far exceed your expectations. RF direct sampling, 15 discrete bandpass filters, large 4.3-inch color touchscreen, real-time spectrum scope, and SD memory card slot. Find out more by visiting icomamerica.com/amateur for more information on all the great ICOM radios.
And one of ICOM's current slogans is heard it, worked it, logged it. I want you to add one more thing to it, enter it. That's right. After each episode of Ham Nation, I want you to go to icomamerica.com/HamNation and register to win some great swag prizes weekly like T-shirts and hats. And you'll automatically be interested in winning a new radio. So you're going to be registered as well for the monthly grand prize drawing for a new radio. For July, that new radio is the ID 4100A entry-level D-Star mobile with big rig features. It's a VHF, UHF dual-band mobile, one band at a time. It's got built-in GPS, terminal mode, and access point mode. There's a micro SD card slot for voice and data storage. There's an optional Bluetooth port available, and there's free downloadable Android and iOS apps available as well. So go to icomamerica.com/HamNation after this in each episode and register to win. Sign up, good luck, and don't forget to follow ICOM America Inc. on Facebook and Twitter. And register each week, because the more you register, and you can do it weekly, the better your chances of winning. And now, Don, what else do we have going on tonight?
Oh, man, good stuff from Frank. Frank's a good guy. And, man, the best of luck with the hometownheroes.org thing. That's an awesome idea. I have the final numbers in for the 13 Colonies special event, if any of you were interested. I know there were apparently a huge amount of interest because they racked up 40,000 more contacts this year than they did last year. 169,884 contacts. The top state was the K2A in New York with 16,000. The top club, the WM3 PEN, almost 7,700. The top SSB was K2K with 6,400. The top, that was high power. Low power for sideband was K2E with 4,200. The top QRP was the K2L with 1,358. The top CW was K2M with 4,444 contacts. K2M also was the top digital with 3,002. And the GB13 COL, they did almost 6,500, and K2Z did 4,720. And if you have a log, then you need to get that sent in. Here's mine. Yes, every slot is full. I probably can't see that because it's bright, but I did 100% full pull on this one. I was bogging deep, and anyway, we got all of them this year. But if you don't have your log filled out, they're having issues with the 13 Colonies website. But, however, there is another place where you can find the online log. Pull that up for us, Vic. It's hamclubs.info/13colonies. hamclubs.info/13colonies. There is an online log form that you can fill out online. I believe you can submit it online, or if not, you can print it and you can email it to them or mail it to the proper address. But everything you need to know is right there. And also the Facebook page. If you go online to Facebook and just search for 13 Colonies, you'll find that. We have a link to the Facebook page as well, I think, on the rundown there, Vic, if you want to take a look at that. But 13 Colonies, 170,000 contacts this year. Just an amazingly fun time, and so happy that I got to do the full pull this year, get them all. Good stuff. So for all of you who worked on 13 Colonies, thank you so much. We certainly appreciate that. We're going to talk about the W9DYV Symposium going on at the Slidell Hamfest. That's where Bob Howell is going to be coming up this weekend. We'll talk about that right after the latest from Amateur Radio Newsline and Dr. T. From Amateur Radio Newsline Report number 2176, these are the Ham Nation headlines for Wednesday, July 17th, 2019. Two more amateur radio groups have weighed in on a controversial proposal to change the primary use of the 2-meter band to be for aeronautical surveillance use.
The Radio Society of Great Britain, the RSGB, has written to the UK communications regulator Ofcom expressing concern over a proposed agenda item for the 2023 World Radio Communications Conference that would reallocate the frequency range of 144 to 146 megs to aeronautical services as the primary user. President Dave Wilson, M0OBW, wrote of the organization's deep concern about preserving amateur radio's primary allocation globally. The French have asked that the 2023 session of the WRC include this proposal on the agenda, which is set well in advance of that year's session. In June, the IARU Region 1 issued a strong statement opposing the proposal's inclusion on the agenda. Separately, the South African Radio League recently added its voice in opposition. SARL noted on its website, quote, "The various amateur radio organizations in CEPT countries are working with their authorities to block the proposal from being put forward as an agenda item for WRC 23, unquote. Meanwhile, the French proposal has advanced for discussion at a meeting in August of the CPT Conference Preparatory Group, where its inclusion at the 2023 meeting will be discussed. For Amateur Radio Newsline, I'm Jeremy Bucci for NJH.
Thinking of activating someplace off the beaten path or working a de-expedition you haven't worked before? Here's an interesting suggestion.
De-expeditions are now possible in Iran. The first location being made available to amateur radio operators is Shahpur Citadel in Shahamahal and Bakhtiari province. In making the announcement, the Communications Regulatory Authority and Persian Amateur Radio Club are hoping to generate interest in other similarly famous sites throughout Iran. Interested de-expeditioners should contact the coordinator Ali, EP3AG at ep3ag@yahoo.com at least 3 to 4 months before the desired date of operation in order to secure the necessary paperwork. For Amateur Radio Newsline, I'm Robert Broomhead, VK3DN.
It seems everyone's wanting to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the moon landing and moonwalk, but perhaps no one more than some hams who worked on the lunar module for the Apollo mission.
Because the Apollo 11 Lunar Excursion Module, the LEM, began with the efforts and talents of the men and women of the Grumman Corporation in New York, it's only fitting that this year's 50th anniversary tribute on amateur radio should begin the same way, with two hams who worked on it at the Bethpage, Long Island facility. As special event station K2M begins the first of its 6 days of operation on July 16th at 1332 UTC, Leon, KD2ONC, and Jim, W2KFV, who are both LEM team members, will be on the air calling the first CQs. The special event station, which is being operated by the Great South Bay Amateur Radio Club, is a tribute to the 50th anniversary of the LEM. That finds Leon and Jim collaborating one more time on one more project. They'll both be signing commemorative certificates that will be given to only the first 50 hams who successfully contact K2M. Be listening for them on 20 meters. The frequency is, of course, 14.321. For Amateur Radio Newsline, I'm Mike Askins, KE5CXP.
And that's all from the Amateur Radio Newsline, your independent source for amateur radio news for 4 decades and counting at arnewsline.org. With Jeremy Boot, G4NJH, Robert Broomhead, VK3DN, Mike Askins, KE5CXP, Karen Eve Murray, KD2GUT at the news desk in New York, and our news team across the globe. I'm Don Wilbanks, AE5DW. 7-3. We'll see you next time here on Ham Nation. Now, here's the solar update with Dr. Tamitha Skov, WX6SWW.
The sun launches a solar storm from a new cycle sunspot, and bright regions are rotating back into view on the sun's backside. Those stories and more in the news this week. This forecast sponsored in part by Eric Johansson. Check him out at Instagram.com/Scubist. Space weather calms down a bit this week, but the sun is still giving us quite a show. We had a solar storm launch from a new cycle sunspot as it's rotating to the sun's west limb. Now, it's not Earth-directed. It's actually directed a bit towards Parker Solar Probe, and it could graze it as it travels south of that spacecraft. Meanwhile, it lets us know, because it's from the new cycle sunspot, that the solar cycle 25 is definitely on its way. Now, unfortunately, the rest of the sun right now is still pretty much at solar minimum. We don't have any other sunspots to even worry about, so that means solar flux is still quite low. For amateur radio operators and emergency responders, it's going to stay like that for quite some time yet. And on top of that, you aurora photographers, it looks like we're going to have to wait about another week or so to get another chance for some fast solar wind so you can get some more aurora. Switching to our M-flare threat meter, you can see the X-ray flux continues to be incredibly low. Back on the 6th, we did get a couple B-class flares, and that was due to region 2744, that new cycle sunspot that did fire off a couple flares at first before kind of quieting down. It hasn't really contributed much to the X-ray flux, and therefore, by proxy, the solar flux continues to be low. Now, around the 14th, it did fire a solar storm, but geez, you can't really tell it by the X-ray flux here. So, you know, even though the aurora photographers might be excited about this, well, it looks like us amateur radio operators and emergency responders really aren't all that excited, because the solar flux is going to continue to stay flatlined easily over the next week and possibly 2 weeks before we get a reprieve. Switching to your solar storm conditions, we've been reasonably quiet until about the 8th, when we got hit by a pocket of fast solar wind that actually bumped us up to active levels and then up to storm levels. And it was sustained long enough. We actually hit storm levels twice over the 9th and the 10th. And this was gorgeous for aurora photographers at mid-latitudes, because it actually brought aurora as far south as Wyoming in the United States. But since then, things have calmed down and they've settled down and settled down. So now we're kind of sitting between unsettled conditions and quiet conditions, and unfortunately these will continue here easily over the next week before we get another chance for some more aurora. Switching to your solar storm conditions and aurora possibilities over the coming week, well, things are pretty quiet right now, and it's pretty much the way things are going to be easily over the next week because we don't have any coronal holes sending us any fast wind anytime soon. So at high latitudes, NOAA's expecting unsettled conditions with maybe about a 20% chance of a minor storm, but that's pretty minor, if you know what I mean. At mid-latitudes, we're only expecting normal to unsettled conditions with about a 10% chance of active conditions. So aurora photographers, don't expect much this week. We're going to have to wait to the end of this week before we get another chance to see some fast wind hit Earth and possibly bring us a little bit of aurora. Switching to your solar flare and particle radiation storm outlook over the coming week, everything is in the green when it comes to big solar flares. We have a spotless sun right now, folks, so, you know, there's not much going on. This makes GPS users very happy. We have no risk for radio blackouts on Earth's day side, but it also means that the solar flux is almost in the mid-60s. Ugh, can you say solar minimum any harder than this? And unfortunately, amateur radio operators and emergency responders, this is really what it's going to be easily over the next week and possibly 2 weeks before we get a reprieve with some new bright regions rotating back into Earth view. Sorry, guys, this is just the way it is at solar minimum. Now, also, because it's solar minimum, we have the cosmic ray flux impinging a bit more than it normally would be. So you frequent flyers, and this does include air crew who fly over 800 hours annually and fly at high latitudes and high altitudes, you are in the moderate range for radiation dose, and this does include prenatal passengers, so please take this into consideration in your flight plans. So the space weather this week is definitely a bit quieter than we'd like it to be, but there are still some milestones we get to celebrate. We saw the first solar storm launch in Earth view from a region that's dedicated to the new solar cycle. So this does mean that solar cycle 25 is on its way, and that gives us new hope. Now, unfortunately, right now, the rest of the sun is pretty much spotless, so amateur radio operators and emergency responders, well, you're not getting too much. We're in the mid-60s for solar flux, which means dayside propagation is terrible. You're going to have to rely on sporadic E if you're in the northern hemisphere, and, well, I don't know, for southern hemisphere, it's probably pretty dismal right now. But GPS users, at least you guys are loving life. You should have some decent GPS reception all the way around the globe, even at low latitudes, because the solar flux is so low. Now, aurora photographers, well, you guys have something to look forward to, but probably not until next week when we get a new coronal hole that rotates into the Earth strike zone and could send us a little bit of fast wind to bring you some more aurora. I'm Tamitha Skov. Thank you for watching.
Thank you, Dr. T. Always a great follow on Twitter. Make sure you follow her at Tamitha Skov and check out the spaceweatherwoman.com website. Well, Bob Heil is on the road. He's actually coming down here to South Louisiana, to Slidell, Louisiana, which is actually the midway point between my house and New Orleans. So I go through Slidell every day, twice a day, to and from work. Big Ham Fest in Slidell this weekend, and there's a big symposium going on. There it is, W5SLA. That's the Hamfest website, but there's a big symposium going on. It's the W9DYV Amateur Radio Symposium, and it basically celebrates West Shum and Central Electronics and basically the birth of single sideband radio. And it's a 2-day event, just all kinds of things going on, as you can see there. Some of the forums include receiver performance verification and enhancement, transmitter audio processing from Dr. Bob, receiver audio enhancement, again, Dr. Bob, low noise antennas for 160 and 80 meter DXing, working 630 meters, the elusive Collins S-line, SDR and amateur radio, and just a whole bunch more stuff. It goes on Friday and Saturday, and of course the Hamfest Saturday with the boneyard and tailgating and VE test and everything else. George is coming down. I'll be there. I always do the VE test at the Slidell Hamfest. Love making new hams. So if you're going to be in the New Orleans area, make sure you come down and check us out at the Slidell Hamfest. Everything you need to know is right there on the W5SLA website as far as the location and the talk-in and everything else you need to know. Check that out at W5SLA.net, and then just go find the Hamfest page on there, and we will see you there. Look forward to seeing a lot of Ham Nation viewers coming down there. Emil, even the cheap old ham, and Tommy from your little dog and pony show, George, is coming out too, right?
I'm not sure if Tommy's going to make it. He may not make this trip. You know, he's been working out of town a lot lately. Yeah. But Emil will be there for sure, and he's going to be doing a presentation on Saturday on the SDR Play. So I'm looking forward to see what kind of cheap old tricks he can do with that. You know,
it's going to be good. Now, make sure that your friend Jim, your friend Jim doesn't come down there because it's hot enough as it is. We don't need him and his blowtorch.
Yeah. Well, I hadn't talked to Jim in a couple of weeks, so I don't think he has any plans to come down there, but he may fire up his motor scooter and strap on the torch and come on. You never can tell.
He's sneaky like that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, tonight on Smoke and Solder, I was just going to show you my mobile installation I did recently on a pickup truck. I traded in my old pickup and got another one here. Oh, it's been back sometime last year. And the radio that I had transferred over quit working. So I got a new ICOM ID5100A. And I've really been enjoying that radio. It took a little doing to get it to mount into the vehicle. I needed to change things a little bit because the faceplate's a little bit larger, and I needed to put it to where I could get a good view and use that touchscreen there. And that's been mighty convenient. It's really easy to operate. But I want to show you how I did it because this is, a small size pickup. This is not a big F-150. This is a little Nissan Frontier. So here is my story on my mobile installation. First, we've got the rig right here. Let me see if I can move off to the side. Maybe you can see a little better. That's the right beside the console. I have a Panavice mount here. It's got a swivel head on the top and one on the bottom. And I've got it mounted to the side of the console down there. That's what's attaching the head. And I can swivel it in any position I want. So that worked out great. Right above it, you can see that hook there. Well, that hook has been decommissioned. That did not work out that well for me. But that was for the microphone. But I'll show you what I did in a moment. So I needed a place to mount the body of the rig now that I had the head mounted. Oh, there's the microphone right there. And this is one of those little 3M command hooks, like maybe you would use to hook a coffee cup in the kitchen or something. It works great for hooking these style of microphones right here. And, that's a non-marring type of adhesive on there. So if I decide I want to move the microphone around, no problem. It moves around plenty easy. So I needed a place to put the body of the rig. And this looked like a good spot right here because there's nothing else here. And you can see that's on the, that's right below the steering wheel on the side of the dash there. Nothing else, but it really doesn't seem like a good place, does it? Well, actually, it was a perfect spot because if you go behind that panel, this is what you've got right here. And there was this big open area that there was nothing in. There's a steering column right up there. And you can see I took two strong metal tabs down here and mounted to the side of the rig. And there's a metal bar that runs across the bottom of the dash. It runs right across here at the bottom. And that's where I hooked those two metal tabs to. And there's nothing touching the radio. It's just sitting there. It's well mounted. It's well ventilated because it's out in the open. And there's nothing else in the way of it. So perfect location for that. So I didn't give up any room under the seat or a dashboard that could have been used for anything else anyway. And, of course, you got to hook power to it. And this is how I did it right here. There's the positive post of my battery. And you can see I connected directly to it as close as I could to the battery. And I've got a fuse right here because you want to make sure you've got that length of cable fused all the way. Otherwise, if it was only fused at the rig and that wire got shorted somewhere between the battery and there, you'd have a piece of wire burning up. And I needed to hook up the ground too, and I did it right down here. This is where the negative lead comes off the battery and is connected to the chassis. So that's a pretty short lead. I connected my ground right there. And I ran a 10-gauge stranded cable, for the power and the ground back into the cab of the vehicle. And that basically, that's all I needed to do except the antenna. And I've shown you how I mounted my antenna before. Well, not exactly like this. It was sitting on the roof, but that is a Comet dual band antenna and a Comet magnetic mount. And yeah, I use a magnetic mount because where I go, there's a good chance that I might end up knocking it off, and I'd rather do that and knock it in the bed of the truck than to pull it out of the roof. That would just be a big bummer for everybody. So there's my mobile installation and the pickup. I really like the rig. I'm enjoying it. Everything's convenient. It's not a heads up like Gordo does, and I considered that, but it just didn't work out for me in this case. I generally use memory channels, and I know where I'm going, so I don't have to really take my eyes off the road. But yeah, heads up would have been nice, but just wasn't in the cards on this particular installation. So that's it for my mobile installation. And if you need a new mobile, or maybe an antenna, or any number of ham radio items, there's a good place to get that, and I bet Don Wilbanks knows where that is.
As a matter of fact, I do. That is a really elegant installation. I got to say, I'd never thought about putting the control part, the RF deck of the radio behind that knee panel, but that makes perfect sense, especially if you've got the room back there for it. That's great. Now, where did you bring the power into the cab? Because I've got a location that I've been using for years that I started using on a Dodge pickup truck back in '95, right after I got licensed. So there are any number of grommets on the firewall. Which one did you pick to bring the power in, George?
That's a good question, and I don't remember right now, but that's generally where I'll do it. I'll put a little slit in the grommet and run my wires through there, and that's what I did in the pickup. On my Expedition, though, I couldn't do that. They didn't seem to come out on the other side of the firewall, so I had to get creative and come down through the fender, and I don't even want to talk about it. It was a nightmare. Yeah. I got it in, but yeah, I think I came around the steering column, but I'm not positive, Don.
That's what I was going to suggest, because if you can't find a grommet or one that's big enough or doesn't, maybe it's full of other wires, the steering column has a great big rubber ring around it, and there's normally enough space, like that much, all the way around it, where you can take a coat hanger or a whip antenna and poke through it and then tape your wire on there and fish it back up through without any contact with either the body of the car or the metal on the steering column. There's usually enough room in there to insulate that. So that's an idea if you're doing a mobile installation. If you can't find another grommet, one that's suitable, always look for the steering column, because that's got to come through. You're going to have to find that, and there you go. So there's an idea. And yeah, if you're looking for a new radio or a new antenna or anything else AM radio related, DX Engineering, that's where you want to go. They're a great place, as you know. And of course, as hams know, radio frequency interference, or RFI, it could be caused by a neighbor's noisy electronic device or some equipment in your own home, can give you major operating headaches. But not to worry, because DX Engineering offers products and resources that help you combat that nasty RFI. For instance, the DX Engineering Ferrite RF noise reduction kits. They feature toroids and bead chokes made from mixes of ferrite, proven to block and dissipate RF currents. When attached to a cable or a wire, these ferrite chokes will suppress RFI in specific applications such as linear amplifiers, base stations, AM broadcasts, and AC/DC generators. The kits also come in combinations of ferrite mixes, sizes, and types for a range of uses. They're color-coded, so you can conveniently identify toroid mixes at a glance just by checking out what color they are. DX Engineering's patent-pending ISO Plus Ethernet RF filter is a great way to suppress EMI and RFI to and from Ethernet cables. Those things are notorious noisemakers. In fact, I had some noise once, and I couldn't figure out what it was. It was primarily on VHF and UHF, and I found it. And if you'll come back to me, I'll show you exactly what it was. You may not think about this, but I've got Bluetooth headphones on right now to listen to the show, and this little USB right here. Now, I don't think DX Engineering has filters for this unless you want to wind a toroid around it. I unplugged this, and the noise went away on VHF and UHF. So it just proves that you never know where that EMI is going to come from. But anyway, we digress. Going back to the to what we were talking about with the Ethernet RFI. Those ISO Plus, it's an inline filter. It joins two RJ45 connectors together to help fight common mode RFI and EMI noise interference from well below 1 megahertz to over 100 megahertz. They can be caused by appliances, power supplies, other electrical devices like this little USB cable. Crazy. Just amazing, the kind of stuff that can make that noise. It's a common problem on Ethernet Cat 5 and Cat 6 cables as well. The ISO Plus is available in sets of 2 or 10 filters. So, get as many as you need. Also available, DX Engineering's high-impedance RF choke kits designed to prevent stray RF on the outside shield of your antenna's feed lines. It's a better solution than coiled coax and inline chokes and ugly ballons. The kits come with a 1/2 inch inside diameter ferrite beads for placement over coax cable, provide heat shrink tubing to secure the beads in place. 2 kits available. The 40 ferrite bead kit for use on antennas from 1.8 to 15 megahertz. The 30 bead kit for 14 to 30 megahertz. And DX Engineering, as you know, ships faster than anybody else in the industry. Most orders placed by 10 p.m. Eastern Time are shipped same day. With proven products and expert advice, DX Engineering is helping you shrink the globe. Request your catalog or shop online 24/7 at dxengineering.com/HamNation. And, of course, we appreciate DX Engineering for all the support they give us here on Ham Nation. And we appreciate our little friend Amanda over in Colorado, manning the chat room. Amanda, how are you tonight?
Busy in the chat room, obviously, but I just have to say, Jeff sometimes says that I make RF noises in the background when he's trying to be on the radio, and he has not found a ferrite bead to fit me yet. I don't know.
Oh,
sorry, couldn't
so many inappropriate comments, so little time.
I know. You'll tell me all about him tomorrow. All right.
Sure
first, I'm wearing my NASA shirt. I'm so proud of NASA Apollo 11 anniversary and my NASA cup tonight. And now I have QRM in the background with Jeff walking around with the radio. Sorry about that. Just anyhow, I wasn't around. I wasn't in school. I didn't get to watch that thing. But I look forward to hopefully being able to see the first man on Mars. So I think Dr. T and I are together with that. All right, let's go over. I have some announcements. We had the Pikes Peak Mega Fest in Monument, Colorado on July 27th. This is a huge one. Huge, you guys. Huge prizes, huge booths. It's a really fun time for everyone. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to make it this year because I'm doing a Raleigh, Colorado, where I'm doing some comms for in Rangeley, Colorado. Let's see what else. Nebraska is hosting a Ham Fest this week in Bader Park. At Bader Park, in Chapman, Nebraska. And you can find their website online. And let's see, the Marshall Space Flight Center Amateur Radio Club is celebrating the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11 this weekend. But I do believe that there are tons. And Don, I think you talked about that a bit. There's a ton of special event stations out there, including even the Motorola group out there in Illinois. I just think this is awesome that there's so many. And George, I had a quick question for you. Jim and a blowtorch. You're going to have to specify more about that.
Oh, it may be time we pull that back out and show it again. It was my friend Jim. Oh, yeah. One of the founders of AmateurLogic.tv. And he's on every now and then. But he did a segment on reclaiming parts or scavenging parts from old printed circuit boards. And it involved a torch and a lot of action with the torch. We'll have to pull that. It's probably about time that we rerun that. So we'll show you in the future, Amanda.
I cannot wait. If it has a blowtorch involved, I'm there. When I hear people for numerous reasons, Don, and I hear people trying to remove parts off of circuit boards and stuff, I've heard the best way is to just throw it in a frying pan and let it heat up and you remove all of the parts, You ever tried that, George?
No, but that might have been safer than what Jim was doing.
Maybe so.
Jim's was quicker.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so then you brought up, Don brought up the whole wiring through the grommet. Which grommet do you go through the firewall in your car? And this just brings me back to car stereo days. And this is why I realized that I knew more about ham radio than I ever did think that I did, because I remember wiring up these very complicated stereo systems in cars with an ex-boyfriend or whatever, and you had to have your capacitor and your ground and hooking up to your battery and your fuse box there. It just brings me back to old times where I'm like, wow, I actually knew this stuff before I really knew it. So it's just kind of fun to go over those.
Universal electronics knowledge. That's all it is. Universal electronics knowledge when it comes to installation in any type of a vehicle. It's all universal.
And when you wanted to know how George did it, now it makes me curious. How did everyone in the chat room do it? How did our viewers do it? Just out of an FYI, and what was your stealthy install and what made your install better? So you guys should probably send some pictures to someone and show us how yours was awesome. And my other thing is that Jeff swears by Pro Clips, and that's what they sell them for a lot of different devices, whether it be your smartphone or whatnot, but they also sell them for almost every radio manufacturer. So it makes a clip specifically for either your pillar in your car or in your front console somewhere, and it will plug into a vent or something and look very stealthy, like it was meant to be for your car. So check those out as well. I don't know how pricey they are, about maybe $35, but sometimes when you're lacking a mounting place for your head of your ham radio, that might be an option for you. So, all right, with that, let's get to an actual real question. I bet Gordo can give us some substance on this. Someone in the chat room was saying, I need a cheap APRS setup. I think we all do at some points in time. We don't all want to invest $500 to use APRS. Gordo, any suggestions?
Well, there's a lot of different APRS type of kits built around Arduino. And so there's a lot of different ways to get onto APRS. But if you can find an old Kenwood that has the APRS built in, as well as a GPS input to an external small GPS antenna, you can get on the air for just a couple of $100. So APRS is wonderful. It's also great, Amanda, for talking about propagation and tropospheric ducting. So lots of neat things with APRS. In fact, the Nevada Ham Radio Convention this weekend in Boomtown, Nevada, I believe they're going to have some discussions on that as well. APRS, less expensive than getting the whole blown radio. Amanda?
Okay. Now, I kind of have one that I have seen demonstrated and we've actually used before. We all have those old smartphones that we've dropped and broke, and the screen is worthless and the phone is worthless, and maybe it's an S3 or an S4, and we're now up to an S10. I have seen when you decided that you're no longer good for the Baofeng and you have upgraded your handheld, you take that old Baofeng that's just been laying there, charge the battery, create an interface, and you can run APRS through that old smartphone and your old cheap Baofeng. Now, you could do that with any radio, but I'm just suggesting the Baofeng because at one point in time, it was buy one, get four free. So, did I go too far? Okay, I hope I didn't go too far. But you can use those radios and make an interface, and you will be surprised on how well it actually works. Now, I know it's not just some kind of built-in, all-in-one thing, and you kind of have to carry all these parts around, but it really does work, and I've seen it demonstrated several times. So that's a pretty cheap way. And in fact, one kiddo, Skylar, Don, you remember Skylar, Young Ham of the Year one year, he was using one on his bicycle. So when he would ride back and forth to work, I thought it was pretty cute to see him out there bicycle mobile, and you could see his APRS track using something that cheap. So
you're right about that.
That's all the question.
In that. and encourage everybody, look out for all three major brands, Kenwood, Yaesu, ICOM America, because each of them are lowering the prices slowly at the retail level of their units that have APRS built in along with GPS. So still some good deals if you want everything all in one. Amanda?
Oh, yeah. And I absolutely love the all-in-ones. I've seen a ton of them around anymore, and I think it's really getting more APRS users out there. It really helps us with our events, Aries events, if you're doing a bike ride or whatever. It's awesome. We currently still have our Bionics unit that we deploy and send out with search and rescue or whoever. Those tend to work well, but you do have to have the APRS coverage in your area. We live in the mountains, and there's not a lot of APRS digis out there. So if we want the coverage we really need, we have to send out a mobile digi as well. But you guys in the urban areas have no problem whatsoever. Gordo, wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely agree. And, it's surprising how far APRS signals will travel in the clear, especially back there in Colorado when you're definitely in the clear. So I would expect anywhere from 50 to 75 miles capability without having to go through a digipeater.
Absolutely. And we're always amazed by what paths we see and we're bounced off of. So, all right, let's not keep it any longer here. I think we've had an excellent show and an excellent time frame. So let me wrap things up here by giving you the nets, and then we'll send it over to Dawn. We do not have a 40-meter net because Kevin had to work tonight. So sorry about that, Kevin. Everyone, if you want to join together on 7192, just for good old time's sake, go ahead. We have the 20-meter net on 14268, and we have D-Star on 14 Charlie, and we have DMR on its new group. And guess what? I did not write that new group channel down, so I really apologize. And they're always in the chat room, so look there and see if they're posting it now. That's really a fail on my part.
31012.
30112?
No.
8675309?
No. 31012. That's 31012. It's a quad array.
The quad array. Thank you, George. I will not forget to mention it the right way next week. Dawn, back to you. You're wrapping this up.
All right. Well, just wanted to thank everybody for being here. Frank, Howell, great stuff with the Homebrew Heroes thing. Don't forget, we're going to be at the Slidell Ham Fest in Slidell, Louisiana, near New Orleans, Friday and Saturday. Well, I'll be there Saturday. Bob Howell will be there Friday and Saturday for the Central Electronics Symposium, 2 days of great ham radio stuff. George is going to come down on Saturday. Well, maybe even Friday as well, but I'm not sure. But I know I'll be there Saturday. Yeah, both. Good. And then, of course, coming up the third weekend in August is the Huntsville Ham Fest in Alabama. That's where we've been doing the Young Ham of the Year Award since, 1993, I think, something like that. A long history with Huntsville. Hamfest.org is their website, and we hope to see you there for the presentation of the Young Ham of the Year Award with Amateur Radio Newsline. Expecting the name of this year's recipient any day now. The awards committee has been on that, and they're trying to figure out exactly who the 2019 Bill Pasternak WA6ITF Amateur Radio Newsline Young Ham of the Year will be. And we'll tell you that as soon as we know. And, of course, we'll honor them in August at Huntsville, Alabama. And our thanks to the Huntsville Ham Fest for giving us a long-term home there. That's all I have. George, Gordon, you guys have anything else to say tonight? George?
Well, yeah, just a couple of things. I will be there Friday morning for the Ham Radio Symposium and listen to Bob's presentation and all the other great presentations that are going to be going on there. I've never attended one of these before, so that'll be fun. And I'll be there Saturday as well at the W5SLA.net Hamfest. And if you're in the area, come on down. You know, I've heard it's a good ham fest. At least that's what Don says. I'm going to find out because this is my first time. One other thing to mention, Randy's wanting some photos of what it is you're building. And send your projects to him, hamprojects@twit.tv. Just photos, no videos, along with a description of what you're doing. and you could be in a future episode of Show Us Your Projects.
Yeah, there you go. If you have a creative way to bring power from the battery into the cab of your vehicle, send him those pictures as well, and maybe we'll put together a package on that. Because anyway, that's really creative. Maybe something that maybe you haven't thought of that that's better than the way I'm doing it. Then by all means, we'd like to see that. Gordon, any final thoughts tonight?
Other than NavCon coming up to Nevada at Boomtown, and I agree with Frank. Nothing beats a homebrew CW key. Just don't try and get it through TSA. Gordo, clear.
All right. Good stuff, Gordon. Amanda, as always, you are the queen of the chat room, and we appreciate you so much. That's going to do it for us. We'll see you guys hopefully this weekend in Slidell, and again next Wednesday right here on Ham Nation on the Twit Network. So for everybody involved, Victor at Master Control, we say good night, 7-3, and we'll see you next week.
Bop.